the world's great novels. The National Broadcasting Company presents the second and final episode in its dramatization of Henry James' penetrating study of a widower and his daughter in the metropolitan America of 1895. Washington Square, another in our series of books that live the world's great novels.
The confession wrung from Mrs. Montgomery that her brother Morris was selfish, and her plea not to let him marry Catherine Sloper, was a triumph and a great moral satisfaction to the father. With the cold, detached attitude of the scientist, Dr. Sloper prepared himself to watch the drama unfold. The idea of a struggle with her father weighed heavily on Catherine's soul, and she was hoping that by being very good, that is, by not seeing Morris and not mentioning him, the situation would in some mysterious way improve. But Aunt Lavinia was dismayed at the lack of any change, and over repeated that Catherine should act, should do something striking. Lavinia was in daily communication with Morris, and pleaded with him to meet her, and finally arranged a tryst in an oyster bar on 7th Avenue.
Ah, Morris, you must prepare for the worst.
You mean your brother won't come around?
You will never win him over by argument. You must take action.
What do you mean?
You must elope with Catherine.
And what will that gain me?
Don't you see? If you marry in spite of him, it will prove you are interested only in Catherine, not the money.
Do you suppose there's a will already made out in Catherine's favor?
Oh, I suppose so. Even doctors must die.
And you believe he would certainly change it?
Yes, but he would change it back again after the marriage. So in the long run, you would get the money.
Ah, but one can't depend on that.
Do you want to depend on it?
Well, I'm afraid of being the cause of injury to Catherine.
Of course you are, my dear boy. But everything will turn out all right if only you will be brave, daring. Carry Catherine away and marry her secretly. Oh, my goodness, the time. I must go before they miss me. I'll tell Catherine I've seen you. How delighted she will be to know I have been with you, to comfort you, to encourage you.
You should not have seen Mr. Townsend. It isn't right, Aunt Lavinia. I promised my father not to see him. Oh, what did he say? How did he look?
He looked very handsome, but terribly haggard and dark under the eyes. There was something grand and brilliant in his very misery.
You'd better not make any more appointments with Mr. Townsend.
My poor child, are you jealous of me?
Oh, Aunt Lavinia, how can you say such things? I don't believe Mr. Townsend himself likes it.
Gentlemen enjoy such things. I know what gentlemen like.
My father wouldn't like it if he knew.
Pray, do you propose to inform him?
No, Aunt Lavinia, but please don't do it again.
But the poor boy. If you could have seen him, his dark eyes, his misery. Someone must see him and let him know that you are steadfast. You must seek him.
I shall tell Father that I want to see Morris again. I shall tell him tonight.
Come in. Come in. Oh, what's the matter, Catherine? You're standing there like a ghost. Come in.
You told me if I should have anything more to say about Mr. Townsend, you would be glad to hear it.
Ah, exactly, my dear.
I thought I would tell you that I have not seen him, but I would like to do so.
To bid him goodbye?
He's not going away.
Then it is not to bid him goodbye.
No, Father, not that. At least not forever. I should like to see him.
Have you written to him?
Yes, 4 times.
It would take only one letter to dismiss him.
I haven't done that. I have asked him to wait.
Catherine, you're a dear, faithful child. Come here to your father. Let me hold you.
Oh, Father, you kiss me so seldom.
Tell me, do you wish to make your father very happy?
I should like to, but I'm afraid I can't.
You can. You can. It all depends on your will.
Is it to give him up?
Yes, darling, it's to give him up.
You are happier than I, Father.
Catherine, have you no faith in my wisdom, in my tenderness, and my solicitude for your future?
Father.
Don't you suppose I know something of men, their vices, their follies, their falsities?
He's not vicious. He isn't false. I can't believe that.
I don't ask you to believe it, but to take it on trust.
What has he done? What do you know?
He has never done anything. He's a selfish idler.
Oh, Father, don't abuse him.
Oh, I don't mean to abuse him. That would be a mistake. However, you may do as you wish,
I may see him again.
just as you choose.
Will you forgive me?
By no means.
I wish to explain, to tell him to wait,
To wait for what?
till you know him better, until you consent.
Don't you tell him any such nonsense. I know him well enough, and I shall never consent.
But we can wait a long time.
Of course, you can wait till I die, if you wish.
Father.
Your engagement will have one delightful effect on you. It will make you extremely impatient for that event.
It is certain, Father, that if I don't marry before your death, I will not after.
Catherine, there's one thing you can tell Mr. Townsend when you see him again. That if you marry without my consent, I do not leave you a penny.
That would be right.
My dear child, your simplicity is touching. Just you make that remark in that tone and with that expression to Mr. Townsend and take note of the answer. It won't be polite. It'll express irritation. He may even be rude.
He will never be rude to me.
Tell him what I say, all the same.
I think I will see him then.
Exactly as you choose.
It will be only once, for the present.
Exactly as you choose. I've told you what I think. If you see him, you will be an ungrateful, cruel child and will have given your old father the greatest pain of his life. You may go now.
Oh, Father.
Oh, my darling, you should not have made me wait so long before telling me to come. You don't know how I've been living. Ah, but that's past. Now, have you called me to give me good news? Has your father repented?
No, Morris. He still looks at it the same way.
Then you must take me or leave me. You can't please your father and me both. You must choose between us.
I've chosen you.
Then marry me next week.
Isn't there some other way?
If you fear your father more than you love me, then your love is not what I hoped it was. You're terribly afraid of him, aren't you?
I don't know that I am. Really?
I don't know what you mean by really.
Morris, my father has asked me to tell you very distinctly and directly that if I marry without his consent, I shall not inherit a penny of his fortune. He made a great point of this. He seemed to think...
Ah, he thought it would make a difference. Well, it will.
How do you mean, a difference?
In that we shall be poorer by many thousands of dollars. But you will not suffer any loss of affection from me. He thought that message would annoy me, and when you delivered it, I would throw off the mask and leave you. Well, you can tell him from me that I don't care that for his message.
Oh, I don't think I could tell him that.
Do you know, you sometimes disappoint me.
I disappoint everyone. Aunt Lavinia and my father.
Catherine, it's your belief, then, he will stick to his idea of disinheriting you.
My sorrow is that if I marry you, he will think I'm not good.
Then he will never forgive you, is that it?
Oh, then you must love me very much.
I will. There can be no doubt of it. But don't you think if you were to try to be very clever, you might in the end conjure it away? It seems to me a really clever woman in your place, if she set about it right, might bring him around at last. Don't you think...
Oh, Morris, I'm not clever. Morris,
Yes?
I will marry you as soon as you please.
Catherine's days in the big house in Washington Square were dismal indeed after her offer to marry Morris any day he wished. Because of her high sense of honor, it seemed that in declaring her love for Morris, she had broken a sacred law. Dr. Sloper knew perfectly well what he was about, and determined not to speak first, he bided his time until Catherine, torn between love for Morris, compassion for her father, and driven by her high sense of duty, broke the silence.
Father, I have seen Morris again.
How does that concern your father, whose wishes you no longer heed?
I think we shall marry before long, and meanwhile I shall see him rather often, about once a week.
Why not 3 times a day? What prevents your meeting him as often as you choose?
Oh, Father, don't you care?
Not a button. Once you marry, it's quite the same to me when or where or why you do it. Catherine, shall you be married within the next 4 or 5 months?
I don't know, Father. It's not easy for us to make up our minds.
Put it off, then, for 6 months. In the meantime, I will take you to Europe.
Father.
I would like very much for you to go.
Oh, Father, it would be delightful to go to Europe.
Very well, then, we will go. Pack up your clothes.
I'd better tell Mr. Townsend.
Oh. Well, if you mean by that, you'd better ask his permission. All that remains for me is to hope he will give it. We will rest here for a while, Catherine.
Father, it's so raw and cold up here. We're so high, I breathe with difficulty. Should we go on?
What, stop before we've come to the top of the pass? And miss the most enchanting view of the Italian Alps?
It's so cold and desolate. Father, why are you looking at me like that?
We have been away 8 months. Have you given him up?
No, Father.
Does he write to you?
Yes. About twice a month.
I am very angry.
I'm
You
sorry.
try my patience. And it's time you knew what I'm like. I'm not a very good man. Though I am very smooth externally. Inwardly, I am very passionate, and I assure you I can be harsh.
Why are your hands twitching? Why are you staring at my throat? Father, can't we go back to the carriage, please?
I am extremely angry with you.
Why has it taken you so suddenly?
It has not taken me suddenly. I've been raging inwardly for the last 8 months we've been abroad. But just now this seemed a good place to fare out. It's so quiet. The valley is far below. We stand on the brink and we are alone. Would you like to be left in such a lonely spot as this, Catherine, and starve?
What do you mean?
That will be your fate, you know. That's how he will leave you.
That's not true. You ought not to say it, Father. It's not right, and it's not true.
No, it's not right, because you won't believe it. But it is true. But what do you mean to do when you get home?
We shall probably marry.
All I ask is that you give me definite notice. When a poor man's to lose his only child, he likes to have an inkling of it beforehand.
Oh, Father, you will not lose me.
Mr. Townsend ought to be very grateful to me. I've done a mighty good thing for you in taking you abroad. With all the knowledge and taste you've acquired, your value is twice as great. We have fattened the sheep before he kills it. Well, I shall waste no more money on this venture. We shall return home.
Upon her arrival in New York, Catherine had to wait until the next day to see Morris. But that evening she listened with mixed feelings of interest and apprehension as the intensely sympathetic Aunt Lavinia embellished the qualities of her betrothed. Though it was a pleasure to talk to one who was not unjust to Morris, it was painful to hear another woman interpret and explain the qualities of the man so dear and understandable only to her.
I suppose you think you know him, my dear, but you don't. You will someday. But it will be only after you've lived with him. I may almost say I have lived with him. I think I know him now. I've had such wonderful opportunities. It's a wonderful character, full of energy and passion and justice true.
He wrote me that you had been very kind to him.
He came quite frequently.
I wish he had not spent so much time here, but had found some employment.
Well, he has found employment. It's beautiful news. He's gone into partnership with a commission merchant.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Now your father will think differently of him.
My father is more determined than before. More terrible.
Well, I must say you've grown very brave.
Yes, Aunt Lavinia. I am braver than I was. I shall never plead with Father for anything. I have come home to be married.
Of course, my darling, we shall be married. But before we do, I would like to have a try at bringing your father around.
You would only make him worse.
Oh, you say that because I managed so badly before. I'm much wiser now. I've had a year to think it over. I'll have more tact.
Is that what you've been thinking of for a year?
Much of the time, the idea sticks in my crop. I don't like to be beaten.
How are you beaten if you marry me?
Of course, not on the main issue, but I am, don't you see, and all the rest of it. On the question of my reputation, my pride in proving your father wrong. Do let me have a go at him again.
Please don't try. Nothing good will come of it. I have a very good reason.
And what is your reason?
He is not very fond of me.
Oh, bother.
Don't say anything unkind, Morris. He can't help it. It's because he's so fond of my mother, whom he lost when I was born. She was beautiful and very, very brilliant. I'm not at all like her. I feel separated from my father now.
And I have come between you and your father.
Morris, you must be very kind to me now. It is a great thing to be separated from your father, whom you worshipped
before I entered your life. I wonder if I can make up for the unhappiness I've caused you, Catherine.
I have been unhappy, or would have been if I didn't love you so much. You and I must be very happy together, Morris. You are all I have now.
My brother's hatred burns with a lurid flame, the flame that never dies. But it does not light up your future, Morris. I can extract nothing from Catherine. She's so terribly secretive since your last visit. That visit when I am so sure something very important happened. She seems to expect to be married soon, and has evidently made preparations while in Europe. Great quantities of clothing, 10 pairs of shoes. My dear friend, I am intensely anxious to see you, as I want to bring you news of the utmost importance. Meet me on Wednesday, and I will tell you.
You have told me of your sympathy 1,000 times, Lavinia. Just as you've told me her father combines the properties of a lump of ice and a red-hot coal. Catherine has made it thoroughly clear, and you have told me till I'm sick of hearing it. He will never give us a penny. I regard that as mathematically proved.
Couldn't you bring a lawsuit against him?
I will bring a lawsuit against you if you ask me any more such nonsensical questions. Oh. A man should know when he's beaten. I must give her up. Yes, I must give her up.
I think I understand you.
Couldn't you take her down a little, prepare her, and try to ease it off?
She will suffer much.
You must console her. You ought to make it easy for me to tell her.
Should you like me to tell her?
Well, you can just explain. Yes, that's it. Explain to her that I can't bring myself to step in between her and her father.
That's like you. So generous, so finely felt.
Oh, botheration.
Do you mean never to see her again?
Oh, no, I shall come again. But what's the use of dragging it out? I've been 4 times since she came back. I can't keep it up indefinitely. She oughtn't to expect that, you know. A woman should never keep a man dangling.
He came again without bringing off the last parting, and again, and again. It was evident that Lavinia had not prepared Catherine for the blow, and Morris found the graceful exit he had mentally rehearsed so many times blocked by the expectant look in Catherine's eyes. Having no airs, no arts, she never attempted to hide her expectancy. But as his calls became of shorter and shorter duration, and his conversation so hollow, when really they should have had so much to talk about, she became alarmed.
Are you sick, Morris? You seem so restless and you look pale.
I'm not at all well.
You oughtn't to work so hard.
I must work. You know, people talk tremendously about a man's marrying a rich girl. It's excessively disagreeable.
Morris, you're too proud. But we must bear these things together.
There are some things we can't bear together, Catherine. For instance, separation.
Why do you speak of separation?
You must promise not to make a scene.
A scene? Do I make scenes?
All women do.
I don't. Where are you going?
To New Orleans. About buying some cotton.
I'm perfectly willing to go to New Orleans.
Do you think I'd take you down there? It's a nest of yellow fever.
If there is yellow fever, Morris, you must not go.
It's to make $6,000. Do you grudge me that satisfaction?
We have no need for $6,000.
You can afford to say that. This is my great chance.
You can go to New Orleans some other time. There'll always be plenty of cotton. It isn't the moment to choose.
You said you wouldn't make a scene. I call this making a scene.
But then it is you who are making it. I've never asked you anything before. We've waited too long already.
Very well, then. I'll transact my business by letter. Now I must go. Try and be calmer the next time I come.
When will you come?
I'll come next Saturday.
Come tomorrow. I want you to come tomorrow. I'll be very quiet.
I said Saturday.
Yes, Saturday, too, but tomorrow first.
Yes, and if I don't come tomorrow, you'll say I deceived you.
You can come if you will.
I'm a busy man. I'm not a dangler.
Morris, are you going to leave me?
Yes. For a little while.
For how long?
Till you're reasonable again.
I shall never be reasonable in that way. Think of what I have done. I've given up everything.
You shall now have everything back.
You wouldn't say that if you didn't mean something. What is it? What's changed you? What have I done?
I'll write you. That's better.
You won't come back.
Dear Catherine, don't believe that. I promise you that you will see me again.
But Catherine waited in vain for word from Morris. Her 2 short letters went unanswered. She tried to hide her grief and desperation, but with her simple, honest nature, this was impossible. Although the doctor had informed his younger sister Elizabeth that the scoundrel had backed out of the marriage, he had said nothing to Catherine. He let a week go by, then one morning strolled into the parlor where she was sitting alone.
It doesn't seem to me, Catherine, that you're treating me just now with all the consideration I deserve.
I don't know what I've done, Father.
You've apparently quite banished from your mind the request I made you in Europe. The request that you would notify me in advance before leaving my house.
I have not left your house.
But you intend to leave it? Your mind has already taken up its residence with your prospective husband.
I will try to be more cheerful.
You certainly ought to be cheerful. To the pleasure of marrying a brilliant young man, you add that of having your own way. You're a very lucky young lady.
I would like to go to my room.
May I first have the pleasure of your answer? When you go, your Aunt Lavinia marches. It would be convenient for me to know when I can expect an empty house.
I don't know. Morris had to go to New Orleans on business.
Will it be tomorrow? Is it next week or the week after?
I shall not go away.
Indeed, where do you plan to set up your abode? Surely, knowing how I regard your marriage, you do not intend to ask your proud young man to live under my roof. I'm afraid the common respect we hold for each other would not survive the strain.
Mr. Townsend will not be back.
Has he backed out, then, just as I said he would?
No. I have broken off my engagement.
You have broken it off?
I have asked him to leave New York, and he has gone away for a long time.
I must say I don't understand you, Catherine. After all these months of steadfast devotion, and when I was given to understand that you could not live without your young man, you calmly tell me you've dismissed him. How does he take his dismissal?
I don't know.
You mean you just told him to go away for a long time? Your tone would seem to indicate that you don't care how he took the dismissal. Isn't that rather cruel?
Cruel? How could I ever be cruel to Morris?
Isn't it cruel on your part to have encouraged the young man all this time? Played with him and then suddenly dismiss him? My dear child, no man likes that, having a woman make a fool of him.
For 17 years, the name of Morris was never mentioned in the Sloper household, but Catherine, refusing even to consider the few suitors the doctor managed to interest, grew into an admirable old maid. There was something dead in her life, and her duty was to try and fill its place. She mingled freely in the usual gaieties of the town, and became a great favorite of the young people, who were apt to confide their love affairs to her. But if she managed to lead an undisturbed life, apparently untroubled by thoughts of Mr. Townsend, the doctor did not, for he was obsessed with the fear that after his death, Mr. Townsend might come back and rob him of his triumph.
Catherine, I would like you to promise me something before I die.
I hope you shall live for a very long time.
Promise me not to marry Morris Townsend after I'm gone.
Why do you speak of him now?
Because he's a topic. He has lately come to New York and has been at your cousin's house.
Oh?
He has grown fat and bald, Catherine. But he has not made his fortune. That's why I ask you to promise.
I seldom think of Mr. Townsend.
Promise me after my death to do the same.
I don't think I can promise that.
I ask for a very particular reason. I am altering my will.
I can't promise.
You are obstinate. Upon my word, I had no idea how obstinate you are.
I was not always so, Father. Once I worshipped you.
About a year later, Dr. Sloper died from a severe cold. Catherine and her Aunt Lavinia lived on quietly for years in the big house in Washington Square. Lavinia, romantic to the last, persuaded Morris Townsend that he should again try to arouse the flame of love in Catherine. He came. It took but little urging, but he left very quickly. Years before, when her father had accused her of being impatient for his death, she had replied, "If I don't marry him before your death, I will not after." And Catherine kept her word.
So ends Washington Square by Henry James, brought to you by the NBC University of the Air as one of the world's great novels. Washington Square was adapted for radio by Joseph Cochran. Geraldine Kay and Sherman Marks were featured as Catherine and Dr. Sloper. Morris Townsend was played by Ken Nordine, and Lavinia by Hilda Graham. Jonathan Howell was the narrator. The music was composed by Emil Soderstrom, and the orchestra was directed by Bernard Berquist. The entire production was under the direction of Homer Heck. Listen next week to the first episode of a three-part version of The Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court by Samuel Clemens. And don't forget that your local public library wants you to make use of its many facilities. To add to your enjoyment of this series, we recommend the Handbook of the World's Great Novels, which you may obtain by sending 25 cents to World's Great Novels, Post Office Box 30, Station J, New York 27, New York. That's Post Office Box 30, Station J, New York 27, New York. John Conrad speaking. This program came to you from Chicago. This is NBC, the National Broadcasting Company.